Hello, everyone. Welcome to Homemakers Radio, a place that you can come and listen while you work. But before you go, I want to show you my teacup. Share that with you. It's one of those Stitch called China cups. I always think it's more amusing to drink out of a cup that has a picture on the inside. And this is by Gracie Bone China. I got it at Home Goods a few years ago, and you can get things like this at Marshall's and Ross and TJ Maxx and reject stores. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just maybe last year's product, or maybe something's just a little bit misplaced on the print, and that's where I buy them because they're sometimes under $6. Now, before you go, I'd like to encourage you to get dressed and take care of yourself. Try to look as glamorous as you can for the home. There's nowhere else to go, and the queen is not coming. So do your very best and paint your smile on, and I will try to keep you company while you do some things that are rather repetitive or tedious, or maybe you just want to sit and listen. And so I want to start out with the paper bag challenge to show you what all we've done, and I will include a picture of what one of my granddaughters did with brown paper. It doesn't have to be paper bag. It can be brown paper. It can be brown paper wrapping, or brown paper from the scrap paper type of thing. And so today I wanted to show you what I did. And I took a cookie cutter. Now I have a lot of these cookie cutters. And Mr. S, when we first got married, wanted to find something that he could get me all the time, so I'd have a collection of something, and he would always know what to go and get. And so he chose cookie cutters because at the time there was a company that would produce a new cookie cutter every season, and there would be some for spring and some for summer and some for winter. And so I have a lot of cookie cutters, and because I often have large crowds here, and I want to serve them something like that, I don't bother with the cookie cutters because it's too tedious. I just spread my batter in a pan, and then when it's done, cut it into squares. But if I have one or two people coming, I might make them each a special cookie of some kind, depending on what their dietary needs are. But today, I want to share with you what I did with this. Is I traced it around a piece of brown paper on a brown paper bag, and I made a tag. Now, a tag is something that you put on a gift, or I don't know what else you do with it. But years ago, someone told me that Victoria Magazine had featured a tree at Christmas time that was just full of tags, and I enjoyed this tag. A lot of the cry-cut industry and the rubber stamp industry make tags. They're fancy, they look cute, and they use them when they have their craft sales, and they just add this little extra piece of art. I just love them. And I also cut a string out of the brown paper as well. And then I used my chalk pen, and I made an ornament. Now, if you go on Pinterest, and I might be able to include here a link for you, and if you're new here, please go to the link in the description box below on the YouTube channel and click that and watch this over on the post on which I'm embedding this video, and see some of the other things. And I will include a link to, I believe it's Pinterest, that has a bunch of these that are actually real little houses, fully dimensional, and so does Hobby Lobby. And I expect they're quite expensive, but if you wanted to, you could make yourself a whole lot of these and decorate. They look like gingerbread houses. That's why they're so enchanting. And so the other thing that I did, so I had a tag, an ornament, and then I don't know if you know what these buntings are, or garlands that people make sometimes when they're having an at-home dinner or party, and it's a certain theme, and they'll hang them up across. They're usually made they're usually like triangles, but I decided to go ahead with the gingerbread houses, and I use this chalk pen, and these things have to be shaken up to work, and then you have to press down on them. But those of you who contribute at least $5 help me to buy things like this, because they're quite expensive. and then I can have something to work with. But anyway, that's what that does, and I really enjoyed making this, and I hope it inspired you. And people have been sending me a few ideas, and I'm so grateful for it. It's giving me so many ideas. And then here's something else you can do with paper bags. Now, this is one of the heavier ones. It doesn't tear very easily, but I can do several things with this. One is I can make a desk pad. Remember the desk pads that we put on the desk, and it'd be a piece of paper on it, and you could write on it, or you could use your artwork on it and your pens. And I use just any kind of felt tip pen to do some of the artwork on the paper bag ideas. And you remove the paper. It had a big stack of paper, and it was really about as big as this. And you slid it inside of a little frame. Well, you can use this, and I put this on the dining table if I'm doing a project on there that involves glue or pens or even writing letters. I can lay my letter paper on it and write, and that way no pen marks get on my table or my tablecloth. And so this is beautiful. And another thing, you can use this, and you could also, after it gets all marked up, cut off the piece and then turn it over and use the other side for something else. And also, I use this in the kitchen when I've got to coat something like fish, and there's a coating that involves rolling it in it, and it's a messy, and then I can just pick the whole thing up and throw it in the trash afterwards. Not the fish, but or any other thing that I need to do where I need something more disposable and I don't want to buy wax paper or any kind of wrap. And the other thing that I use this for is in the refrigerator, in the vegetable and fruit bins. And then I don't have to, those things are a little bit harder to pull out and clean. I don't have to clean them so much because I just take the paper bag out and throw it away. So I hope that's inspired you. A couple of household hints. So ladies, I have a few things I want to talk about before I start reading some more of Brian Kozlowski's book, The Jane Austen Diet. And I so wish that he would have called it The Jane Austen Lifestyle. Who wants to see the word diet on the title of a book? So I just want to read a few things from my notes, and then I have a little verse for you, and then we'll get into reading some more of his book. So the first thing, another thing you can do with a brown paper bag is you can make a pattern. Now, you see this scarf I'm wearing? Somebody wanted a pattern for it. So what I did is I just took it off and I folded it in half like this and laid it on the edge of the bag, and I traced around it. I didn't trace the ruffle because that's just a long piece of fabric, and I just put the and you just make twice the length that you need to make it gather. It's just a strip of fabric that's straight. But I traced this, I traced the next line, and then I cut that out, wrote the instructions right on the bag, and made her a pattern. And so you can, I have used paper bags for patterns many times. If I wanted to copy someone's pattern, just open it up, and sometimes there's enough there to make copy a sleeve or copy the bodice front or something like that. So one of the things that we have to do to keep from discouragement in homemaking. Now, I'm not saying that homemaking is such a terrible job that we're just all going to be discouraged. It's just like anything else. And you have to, and the beauty of it is you have the freedom to choose what you're going to use to keep you uplifted and encouraged. And so one of the things that I like, I have a little list here for you. If you're having problems focusing, and you're starting to kind of sink down into discouragement, and especially during these times, we don't want to be. Wasn't our idea to be in a war, but you have to understand that even becoming a Christian is a war, because you're going to be attacked now, because it's all a signal right away that you're a target. And so you have to understand that. When the Ulster Scots came out west and settled the land out here, they were told by their parents back in the 1800s, 17 and 1800s, look, everything you try to do someone will try to stop you. And when people grew up knowing that, they knew that was part of the territory. But unfortunately, our generation didn't know that whatever we try to do that will better ourselves at home or anything else, like anything you decide to do, someone's going to try to stop you. And if you realize that, then the first discouraging word you hear, you think, aha, I'm headed in the right direction. I must be doing something right because somebody noticed and they're trying to stop me or discourage me. So one of the things, not one of the things, but I'll make a list of things for you to do if you're having problems really focusing, getting started. And one is have a reading stack of things that maybe came in the mail or some books and favorite publications you like stacked up there the way they did in the old days. Don't you remember our mothers and fathers had a reading stack set beside their chair? They would just say, well, now it's my reading time. Maybe spend 15 minutes just reading. And if you can, read aloud. This is a great skill. If you can read aloud, that is the best way to learn to read to children, because your reading skills are very important to them and other people too. I remember once I was reading something to a group of ladies that I had here, and I just said I thought we always have some kind of human interest story or a joke or something to read before we get into serious study. And I was reading this and someone said, you're a good reader. Well, look, how do you become a good reader? By reading aloud, by practicing, by doing it over and over. And I think a lot of people are discouraged because they only know their failures. But if you'll practice something, you'll come better at it. Remember what Elizabeth Bennet said? My piano playing would be better had I taken the trouble to practice more. So just practice. That's what, they say, practice makes perfect. And so the next thing that I would have you do is to spend some time outside. Spend some time outside just breathing the air. And you can look up, someone sent me, people are very helpful, and they're sending me links. You can look up breathing techniques that are very helpful, that actually are antiviral. So I am mandating antiviral activity today. And the other thing is exercise, even if it's in the house. Open your window a crack and get your little rebounder out and just sit on it and bounce for a while, or stand on it and do some exercises. Now, Fabulous 50s had a 5-minute rebounder exercise. Might be a little too vigorous for you, but I mean, she's good enough that you could be 15 and benefit from all of her exercises. And although you might find something you like better, that's the one I like. And so I wanted to emphasize that because I was so inspired by Brian Kozlowski's chapter on the Jane Austen diet, on the air and outdoors and breathing, and how much time they spent outdoors, and how some of them in her books were discouraged because they had to stay in because it was raining. But I will say one thing is that I don't read everything that I don't read everything from his text, because his language is sort of worldly, and I mean, he doesn't swear or anything like that, and it's not vulgar, but it's just a little bit out of my appropriateness for me to read aloud, so sometimes I'll just kind of skip some of the stuff that he wrote. So I hope you understand that, and don't be in a hurry to buy it just because of homeschooling, but do it for your own reading. And maybe you could take notes in one of those little notebooks and make it a commonplace book and write down the most important points that you liked, and that way it would be palatable for your homeschool students or for your children at home. And but I will read something of his. I was so inspired by the last chapter on going outside that I began to do that, and it just created a different world. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. I have a son that sort of we're bonded together in our minds, and he'll text me and say, I just discovered what a joy it was to go outside more than I had been, and how different it made me more creative, and it made me happier, and instead of always working indoors. And this is the problem with the way the workplace has been, is it's so indoors, and they used to call the workplace the sick buildings because there was no air coming out of them, and natural air. If you ever stayed in motels on a trip, you can't even get the windows open in a motel. You cannot open a window, and so you've got all this fake air coming in, and not as healthy for you. But I suppose that's why people would rather have a camper and go camping, as they can regulate their own outdoor experience. And but before I go to read this, I'd like to read something out of, let me just go through my stuff here and see if there's anything that I left out before I start reading. So have an exercise program, have a reading program, even if it's just 5 minutes each, and give yourself 5-minute jobs. An exercise program, a reading program. Go on YouTube and find a watercolor class that's free for beginners, and just do 5 minutes of that, and learn how to paint a flower. Learn one thing. And also, paper bag challenge. Think of something. You don't have to do it, but think of something you could do with this material. And so if you have those things, like a reading program, an exercise program, and outdoor air program, just 5 minutes of each, you'll find things changing for you. You'll find that discouragement going away. And don't give in to gloom. The minute that gloom starts coming, I don't think anyone ever told us you have to keep going, and when the gloom comes in, not to sink into it. And if you could just imagine the pioneer era in your country, and all countries have had this, especially the Western countries, and if you can just imagine these women having to hang their wash outside no matter how they felt. If you can just imagine their lives and how they still had to go out and bring in the wood, no matter how cold it was. And I have been discussing this with one of my children, one of my sons, who texts me a lot, and how to develop self-control. You have to do things that don't feel natural or comfortable at the time. Excuse my voice. I'm hoping I can last long enough to read to you today. Well, one of the things that I discovered that is in the morning, before the anxiety sets in, because you see I'm the anxiety queen, there's always a few moments where I feel quite uplifted and inspired and even creative. And I remember just when my children were growing up, how much they liked this verse in Psalms chapter 5, and we were homeschooled, and we had a lot of homeschool material that would refer to this verse, and it was about how you should meet God in the morning. And I guess that's because your mind is not cluttered yet with all your own personal anxieties and the world's anxieties. At night, you're more discouraged. At night, we sometimes feel like all is over, all is doomed. But things change in the morning. Who was it? It was in Wives and Daughters, I believe, one of the episodes where Mrs. Hamley was comforting Molly because she was so upset that she had spoken rudely back to her father. And Mrs. Hamley said, there. All will be well in the morning. And so in the morning, this is the best time to do your praying. And so we learned this in chapter 5 of Psalms, and it says, "O Lord, in the morning you hear my voice. In the morning I prepare a sacrifice for you and watch." That's verse 3. So that's just such a sweet verse. O Lord, in the morning you hear my voice. In the morning I prepare sacrifice for you and watch. And you know, there are several, if you can get a good concordance, you can find more references to being in the morning, to meeting God in the morning. It is so sweet. So this book that I've been reading, called The Jane Austen Diet, had so much about being outside, and especially in the morning. I started to, instead of dreading the fact that the darkness was still there and the light was only slowly coming in, I opened the door, stepped out on the porch, and just stood there for a while smiling because of the morning coming in, and the dark was not as daunting. And this has just inspired me so much. I've been walking and I have been going outside more. And so I want to read to you now. It's almost as if he had a dictionary concordance that showed every part of the Jane Austen novels, and where they referred to things like drinking tea or outdoors or exercise, because he had a chapter on each one of these things. And what it is, it's almost a history book, because it gives us an insight into how the people before us felt about life and lived it, and they had just as many of the same kind of problems we have today. They had wars and rumors of wars, and they had people around them that were deceitful, and they had people around them that were loyal, and they had money problems. They had all the same problems we have today. And she wrote books that were so amusing, and he drew more out of it than the witty, comedic, romantic type of message that most of us get. He went a little further and dug a little deeper and found a lot about them. And so he wrote a book that includes health and meals, what they ate, and good food, and also their activities, and similar to Linda Lichter's book, Simple Social Graces, and which was later changed to The Benevolence of Manners, in which she went through the Victorian era, and she showed how they lived, what their family life was like, what their meals were like, what their worship services were like, what their correspondence and communication was like, and what it was like, what their education was like, how their activities, their picnics, and went and investigated this through letters and diaries and historical accounts that were reliable. And this is what I like about this. So today he's talking about the sun, and this is a taste for nature, and it's page 188 of the Jane Austen Diet. But I wish it had been the Jane Austen Diary, really. We don't need more diets, do we? So he shows how in several novels it refers to the sun. And I think that the 1995, I believe it was the 1995 movies, Emma and I believe Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, had really good sunny scenes in it that you might like. As the sun appeared on the picnic party in Sense and Sensibility, they were all in high spirits and good humor. Do you remember that? A gleam of sunshine in Northanger Abbey makes Catherine correspondingly happy. The sun appeared and Emma's spirits were refreshed. Now these from the book. You probably have sensed it yourself. A day at the beach usually leaves people running high on euphorically good feelings, and accounting for why most of us prefer holidays in sunny locales, say over the Arctic tundra. Yeah. Yeah. How many times do you hear about people wanting to, I'm going to go on my summer vacation in the Arctic tundra? A preference that's quite literally all in our heads, sure. Sunlight triggers our brains to produce more of the good, feel-good chemical serotonin, the hormone that helps balance and better our moods. That's why I feel like that we should obey God rather than man, as the Apostle Paul said, and go outside and enjoy the elements that he created for us, the sunshine, contrary to what the tyrannical powers that be tell us to do, because it's against God's law, and it's antiviral to go out in the sunshine. And if this is really about a virus, then they should be very glad that we want to make our children well and ourselves well and keep our babies healthy by having sunlight and outdoors, and preventing an overtaxing the healthcare system. So the same hormone drug companies now pop into antidepressants. Oh, I didn't know that. More sunlight meant better moods, confirmed a pivotal study in 2002. Less sunlight led to symptoms of depression. Yes, would you think that something so simple could help us? And how much our current generation has gotten away from the things that God already put there that we could be using to make us vibrant and healthy and well and happy too. Austen had already figured that out in 1814. When her brother Edward was stressed out and shut up indoors from wintry weather, Austen nails the perfect remedy. Edward's spirits will be wanting sunshine. How much our own bodies want sunshine is still being researched. Its refracted benefits reaching far beyond mood. Since 1984, for instance, doctors have noticed that patients recovering from surgery in hospital rooms with sunny window views, rather than just looking at a brick wall, had shorter hospital stays and needed less pain medication. Brightening our days with a bit of sunlight also gives us better sleep, better bones, and better eyesight, causing health experts worldwide to push back on the pendulum. Today, responsible sun exposure is the new run for your lives to the shade. Just the moderate sun prescription Austen advised all along. Yes, many people have sleep problems. How much outside air have you got, and how much sunshine did you get? Now, we live in a northern climate that in the winter, there'll be a little tiny ray of sunshine come a few minutes during the day, and we'll see it, so we'll run out on the front porch and stand there for a while, or go and stand in it and let the rays fall on our arms. And because it's so important to us in the winter. Now, and just pursuing some of it will make us healthier, even if we don't get it. Just pursuing it and just looking for ways to make do can make us stronger and healthier and happier. You won't find any lobster red sun worshippers among her heroines. The sun's healing warmth, like everything else in Austen world, needs its counter-dose of cooling moderation. Too much, and you risk looking like the sun-beaten Admiral Baldwin in Persuasion. Yes, remember that opening scene, and the ones that have seen the movie. His face, the color, this is what he said. His face is the color of mahogany, rough and rugged to the last degree, all lines and wrinkles. Of course, he's talking about a seaman, of course. Too little sun, and you'll join the sallow ranks of Miss de Bourgh in Pride and Prejudice, pale and sickly, and about as attractive to Darcy as a porcelain chamber pot. Yes, striking the perfect balance is what Austen's heroines do best. Sparkling in sunshine and freshness, without overdoing it, and without sunscreen. Here's how. I've never worn sunscreen. I mentioned that last time. But this is interesting how the youth in the, I would say, 1950s, when I was very young, growing up, the women, the girls especially, wanted to look like what she described here, fresh as the outdoor air, fresh as a daisy, sparkling like sunshine. They wanted that fresh bloom of health. That's what they desired. And the lights, camera, action was simply the sunshine and the outdoors. So this was, and our clothing reflected it too. For instance, if we were going to make a dress, we would choose a print that had strawberries on it or daisies on it or something like that, because it lifted your mood. It reminded you of this beautiful outdoor life. Timing. Not all sunlight is cheerful in Austen world. In fact, the intense glare of midday sun is positively insufferable. In Emma, the strawberry pickers soon stop picking once the glaring sun comes out. all saying they could bear it no longer and must go sit in the shade, a feeling shared by the walking party at Southerton in Mansfield Park. Finding the midday sun insufferably hot, they head for the darkness and shade of a nearby wood, leaving the unmitigated glare of day behind. It's still one of the best solar secrets to copy today. Yeah. The sun's UV radiation, that's ultraviolet, is strongest at midday, a time when the sun isn't just hotter and higher in the sky, its skin-damaging potential is higher too. Austen characters instead prefer to be outside in more amiable light. Mornings and late afternoons are the usual times for sauntering outdoors in Jane's novels, appropriately enough in times when the sun's UV rays are always gentlest and safest. Protection. Of course, there are times in Austen world, say an impromptu visit from Lady Catherine, when characters are forced to face the sun at inconvenient times. Don't you remember Lady Catherine de Bourgh saying, "Why, the rooms are full west. It must be terribly uncomfortable to sit in here in the afternoon." And at such moments, even sun-loving Lizzie reaches for her parasol. Parasols, bonnets, hats, these are the sunscreens of Regency life. And while I don't necessarily recommend all of the above, especially walking outside with an umbrella when it's not raining, rude people in cars tend to stare and shout garbled threats. If you'll go on YouTube and find a video of people walking around in Victorian times and in the sun, many people were carrying umbrellas. That's how they shaded themselves. You try to do that today, and they just look at you like you're crazy. And so he said, hats and clothing are usually better at blocking the sun than slathering on sunscreen. They act as physical shields to the sun's rays, whereas sunscreen is applied to exposed skin, and often not correctly. That is, rubbing a thin layer of sunscreen into the skin, as opposed to keeping a thick, buttery layer on top, can do more harm than good. When the chemicals in most modern sunscreens are absorbed into the skin, they inadvertently allow the sun's rays to absorb deeper as well, increasing the risk of skin damage and premature aging. Better to do a Regency rethink, donning your own modern version of the very smart bonnet when you'd rather stay out of the sun. How many artists have been inspired by a woman on the beach with a great big hat and a long flowing skirt, and see how much more good we could do to people. We could inspire artists and to ourselves and our skin in one of those big hats, and covering yourself. Somebody wisely posted a comment to me that clothes are to conceal, not to reveal. Well, if you're in a climate where the sun is very treacherous in the summer, those long clothes and those long sleeves, and they're so protective and they're so important. Okay, the shades of Pemberley. Jane Austen was cool enough without sunglasses. Perfectly so, I thank you. And it might be time to ditch the shades ourselves. I had a pair of prescription glasses one time during an era when they made these prescription glasses that automatically shaded in the light, depending on the light and the sun, and they could become real dark outside, and they could and then indoors they were perfectly natural. And then I read an article somewhere, this was before the internet where you could research this kind of stuff, and I read an article somewhere that said that your eyes need to adjust to the light naturally and not be shaded, and there were reasons for it. It had something to do with the pupil and the light, and how your eyes needed to be like God made them, work the way God made them, and not be artificially shaded. And so here's what he says here. And it might be time to ditch the shades ourselves. Designed to inhibit light, sunglasses do it a bit too well, blocking our eyes from experiencing the natural light needed to trigger important healthy hormone secretions in our bodies. We must allow for the effect of shade, says Austen, and shading our eyes at inappropriate times could even be damaging. Sunglasses circumvent a very protective optical talent. When sunglasses first came out, there was a great uproar against them because they thought it made people look incognito and suspicious, and when they entered a shop, the shopkeeper wanted them to remove their sunglasses. Sunglasses circumvent a very protective optical talent. Without sunglasses, our eyes naturally know how to shield themselves and how from the sun's UV rays. Bright light automatically causes our pupils to shrink, drastically limiting their sun exposure. Now, you can learn a lot about this in a homeschool health book or science and health book for homeschools, because they are quite thorough in teaching children how the body works and what the point is for many different actions of the body. Dim light does the opposite, opening our pupils too wide to let in as much light as possible. That's right. Sunglasses confuse this natural reflex, tricking our eyes into thinking the sun has already set on a shady world. Our pupils are subsequently left wide open, potentially letting in harmful UV rays just when they should be shrinking. But nobody needs squint while Jane's around. Her historically safer alternative, put on your hat this moment. That is so deep that I think we should dwell on that. We are so remarkably airy. Ah, the heady delights of fresh air. Austen's most shamelessly convenient plot device. It's easier to count the number of heroines who don't bump into men after popping outside for the innocent enjoyment of air. Well, these days, everyone just lives in the car. We are surrounded by the most beautiful land I have ever seen, and other places too, but you don't see anybody walking in it. You don't see artists setting up their easel over there in the pasture trying to capture that beautiful light and the beautiful scenery and beautiful foliage that's growing around there. You don't see people walking with their dogs in it. You don't see people having picnics in it. It's so sad that so much is done indoors. We're not really creating beautiful, inspiring scenes by our bodies being out there for other people to get ideas from. Marianne's own tale is condensed into something like, need fresh air, there's a hillside, let's climb it, sprain an ankle, meet Willoughby, go bonkers, nearly die, and end of story. And yet, fresh air in Jane's novels is pretty neat stuff in its own right. You might call it Austen World's recreational drug of choice. Wouldn't that be better than adrenaline, which we all live on? Why don't you try substituting the fresh air for the adrenaline? Every time you feel anxiety, every time you feel stiffness, every time you feel upset, frustrated, worried, unable to concentrate, go outside, see what happens. You might end up going outside 40 times a day, but let's just see. Why don't you just keep a notebook and keep a record of your reaction or anything like that. Purely breathing fresh air is enough to put a rosy glow, a happy smile, and a spring in the step of her characters, outdoor air and physical ecstasies being one and the same. Liberal airheads, the lot of them. We are so very airy, brags Isabella Knightley in Emma. Air even winds up on their pharmaceutical prescriptions. Jane Fairfax only enters the neighborhood of Highbury under the strict orders from an offstage doctor, prescribing she dose up on more country air for the recovery of her health. Isn't that wonderful? That's what you can do if you have friends in the country. Say, I have a prescription for more country air. That's what I'll do. I'll have a Jane Austen, a 2-hour Jane Austen, Austen World, Regency health farm here for 2 hours. And they come out here and we'll have a certain amount of air and we'll have a certain amount of singing and music, and then we'll have a certain amount of other things. So Think back. Oh, here it is. Jane Fairfax only enters the neighborhood of Highbury under the strict orders from an offstage doctor prescribing she dose up on more country air for the recovery of her health. What are these people puffing? Incidentally, the same fresh air we should all be puffing more on. Think back to the time you turned off the air conditioning and opened all the windows in your house, or the last time you drove on a country road with the windows rolled down. This last summer, it was blistering heat. I did not turn that air conditioner on because I didn't like the noise. I don't want to pay for the exorbitant electric bill that it would have caused. I left the doors and windows open as much as possible. I have screen doors, and that prevents the bees from coming in. But it was uncomfortable, I'll have to say. But I was healthier. I was much healthier without it. You need to check what's actually in those AC units and what kind of air you're breathing once it gets in here more cool. Now, I studied one time and kind of looked up as much as I could about how people used to keep cool in the really hot weather. There were so many different things that they did that were very effective and healthy for you too. Chances are you felt a weird and wonderful sense of physical well-being, stretching your arm out the window of the car in response, riding your fingers up and down in the flittering wind, the human equivalent of a dog dangling its tongue out the car window. It's a universal instinct. Back in the 1940s, the British government knew that something was inherently healthy in fresh air, advising housewives during World War II to step outside for frequent air baths whenever they could. Mothers in modern Scandinavia are more likewise famous for their staunch belief in the curative benefits of fresh air. Japan's forest bathing movement is now one of the country's most powerful pillars of preventative health care. See, it's antiviral. Involving nothing more than a slow, airy walk through the woods. Now, if you don't have a woods, why don't you just plant one? Somebody gave me some acorns the other day, and I decided I would plant myself a little woods. And I have been out planting for the oak trees, and hoping to have little woods to walk around in. So even if you can't plant trees, plant something so that you'll have pathways and things to walk around in, even in your small area. And so we circle back to Jane, who predicted it 3 centuries ago that we are all made materially better for a change of air, a mysterious relationship with an invisible element no heroine's or human's health is complete without. Long before we sealed off our homes from the outside world, Austen knew that indoor and outdoor air were 2 different things. Inside air could go stale or foul, as Austen sensed it. Regency homes had their own air quality issues. Soot and smoke from fireplaces meant the air not only smelled differently inside, it made people feel differently too. Austen characters often complain of a mysterious dullness whenever they're cooped up indoors for too long. In Pride and Prejudice, Jane Bennet does not look well after a prolonged period inside. Staying indoors is likewise the worst punishment Mr. Bennet can inflict on poor Kitty. You are never to stir out of doors till you can prove that you have spent 10 minutes of every day in a rational manner. I think we should memorize that, don't you? How horrid all this is, cried Charlotte Palmer in Sense and Sensibility, going stir-crazy when only 1 day of rain keeps her shut up indoors. Such weather makes everything and everybody disgusting. She ought never to be long banished from free air. Today we'd recognize these odd symptoms of sick building syndrome, as in sick building syndrome, which I mentioned at the beginning, the buildings that people work in all day long and that are all closed up and you can't open a window and the air is piped in. It's called a sick building syndrome, as in why most people feel inexplicably lousy in health, mood, or general well-being the more time they spend indoors. Now, see, it is just hitting a lot of us from this current political situation, how much we need that outdoor air and how important that is. And because a lot of people are home that weren't previously home, they now can open their front door and step out whenever they want. They don't have to wait for the obligatory 10-minute break provided by their institution. And now we're not institutionalized anymore. And of course, they used to call the home an institution, but it's the best, most free institution there is. You can pick out what air you want to breathe and what door you want to go out and how long you want to stay out there. And so you get to choose. And it's far more consequential now than it ever was for Austen. Modern buildings contain more than just Regency fires to foul up the air. Synthetic chemicals in our paints, floorings, furniture, beddings, plastics, cleaning supplies, and air fresheners make for more indoor pollution than even Fanny in Mansfield Park could imagine. Now, years ago, and usually in your 40s, and I don't know why this is with women, but in their 40s they end up with a sleep disorder. And it could be an accumulation of many different things, but I decided to make some changes to see if it would help. I spent more time outside. I changed all my bedding to natural fibers, and it had to be 100% cotton. And now they have the bamboo too, which I like a lot, or linen or something like that. And anything that I wore on my skin, even to sleep in, had to be of a natural fiber, usually a woven. And then I stopped eating or drinking anything that was packaged or pre-made, prepared, and just everything was from home. And it's amazing how easy that was to restore my health and get my sleep back. And then this idea that if you have not been outside very much, you probably will sleep less. And also, I got into the just gentle exercises on purpose. And then I started the 5-minute thing. 5 minutes I'm going to read. For 5 minutes I'm going to do some stretches, exercises, and also make sure that my social life is limited to things that aren't going to discourage me. And also just things that would build up my life. And it's amazing how it came back. But our homes are so full of, like he said, our homes, if you buy a new couch, it's not even made of real material. It's just made of polyester and things like that. And so we've got all this stuff in our homes. And I was blessed because at first when I came here, I was really disappointed because the manse was in terrible shape. But it was so old that it didn't have all these modern materials in it. And even though it has cracks in it that leak in this cold air or too hot air, at least it's all natural. It doesn't have insulation. And so I don't know how that is. It doesn't have insulation, so it's not warm enough in the winter. It's not cool enough in the summer. There's just no insulation. But sometimes it's an advantage, to get so poor that you end up in a shack somewhere. And then he mentions cleaning supplies, air fresheners, and plastics. And I have mentioned to you that I went to a spray bottle with a vinegar in it, and that's my cleaning supplies. It cleans windows, it cleans bathrooms, it cleans surfaces, and then no child will ever get dump over a container of bleach or some other cleaning agent in my house or get poisoned by it. And then also I noticed that the detergent companies were owned by the same people that own the pharmaceutical companies. And then I thought, you run detergent in your hot water in your washing machine, and then all that air comes through your house, and then your children start having breathing problems, they start coughing, you don't quite connect it. But once I got rid of detergents, my breathing got better, and there wasn't so much coughing around here. And so he mentions this, synthetic chemicals in our paints, flooring, furniture, bedding, plastics, cleaning supplies, and air fresheners. One of the worst things that I've ever experienced is go for a walk in a neighborhood, and all these people are running their dryers, and you smell the dryer sheets, and you smell the downy and everything, and it's terrible. And I at first, when they first came out, we liked them. It was different and made the laundry smell good, but over time, I developed an allergy to it. So this makes for indoor pollution. And that's why candles, you have to be careful. If you're going to use candles, use the natural beeswax candles, and because they have impurities in them too. Air fresheners and make more indoor pollution than even Fanny in Mansfield Park could imagine. She physically slumps by just being in a stuffy house in Portsmouth. She was in the midst of closeness, confinement, bad air, bad smells, and most of us are slumping today without realizing it. In 2004, Danish researchers found that being near the volatile fumes emitted by modern computers can negatively affect how people think and concentrate. All more reason to embrace Austen's smart solution, popping outside for a pleasant airing whenever you can. See, it doesn't always have to be exercise. Just pop outside just because it's there and it's helpful. I advise you to go out. The air will do you good. You see, when did we stop saying that? The fresh air will do you good. When did we stop saying that? I remember that phrase, don't you? Some of you are not elderly enough to remember it. I pity you. Stepping outside is enough to comfort Anne, tranquilize Fanny, freshen Emma, and inspire Marianne. Observations incredibly attuned to scientific reality. Now, see, for one of your assignments, kids, start watching some of these 1995 productions of Jane Austen's, the BBC productions of Jane Austen's novels from the 1990s, and observe the air, observe how they're invigorated and excited by, there's a bit of sunshine, let us catch how inspired they were, how romantic they thought it was, the air, the sunshine, being outdoors. And start watching this and observing this. Now, one time, I took my daughter and one of my granddaughters, and I said, we're going to have a weekend of, it wasn't a weekend, like a couple of days during the week of Jane Austen. And we're first going to observe in this movie all the times the music changes according to the character, and just to show how cleverly it was put together. And then we're going to observe all the times that a scene takes place outdoors. And now we're going to observe all the times they eat or drink tea. And now we're going to observe all the times they read. I don't know if he covered reading in here. I'll have to look through it again. And so another time we would observe this. We like the set. Let's look at the colors and see how things coordinate with color and how color coordinates with mood and just the interiors. And so these are good things to think about. If you don't have a country life yourself, you can go and watch some of these things. They can be helpful. Fresh air recharges our mental batteries because it's literally, if I could only stop and go outside right now and get some fresh air. If I were more clever, I could be recording this on my phone and go outside and do a live, but I really don't want to do a live video because then everybody has to stop and write. Then I have to stop and read what you're writing. This is really better. It energizes differently than indoor air. Unlike the tightly sealed, stagnant air inside our homes, the constantly circulating air outside, the free air, as Austen calls it, that's why I don't think we should be masked. We need that free air because it's antiviral. And breathing it is antiviral. Means it's a naturally abundant source of supercharged negative ions. Negative ions are the antioxidants of the air. The more we breathe, the better we feel. Science is still discovering how they do it, but negative ions seem to instantly improve our ability to absorb and transport oxygen through our brain and body, resulting in an elevated sense of physical and mental well-being. This is the unique property of fresh air that Charlotte from Sanditon fundamentally believes in. I'm not familiar with that novel. It has always some property that is wholesome and invigorating to me. It's unsurprising, then, that places with the highest negative ion counts, where air and water churn about most freely, at the seaside, for instance, are the places people feel at their best. My husband's, Mr. S's, naturopath doctor wanted him to go down to the beach and walk on the sand regularly for the health of his body and particularly his feet. As you get elderly, you have to take care of your feet. Just listen to the happy holidayers at the beachside town of Lyme in Persuasion. Oh, yes, I am quite convinced that the sea air always does good. There can be no doubt of its having been of the greatest service to Dr. Shirley after his illness. He declared himself that coming to Lyme for a month did him more good than all the medicine he took, and that being by the sea always makes him feel young again. I believe, yes, that is in the book, but I believe that phrase might have been put in the movie from the 1990s. Most of us can get the same feeling closer to home. After rainstorms, for instance, the air tingles with higher negative ion counts. Did you know that? Emma seems to be innately aware of it, eagerly soaking up the energized air after a heavy summer storm. In the afternoon it cleared, and Emma resolved to be out of doors as soon as possible. Never had the exquisite sight, smell, sensation of nature, tranquil, warm, and brilliant after a storm, been more attractive to her, and there her spirits refreshed. But then again, even Emma can't be running about all day chasing ionized raindrops. The woman has better things to do. Paint Harriet's picture, frame Harriet's picture, ruin love lives, the list goes on and on. We feel, Emma, life is rather busy for all of us. It's also handy to keep a few other fresh air strategies up your muslin sleeve. So this little section here is called, I'm very fond of standing by an open window. There were several scenes in Wives and Daughters where Hyacinth was standing at a window overlooking a scene, which I thought was quite clever how they did that. Simply opening a nearby window can do wonders in improving the indoor air quality. It's truly the healthiest air freshener at our disposal, according to researchers at the University of Leeds, who found that opening windows in hospital rooms dramatically reduces the risk of infection. Fungal spores, carbon dioxide, and noxious fumes from electronic gadgets around in buildings that are tightly shut in from the free air outside, like bacteria, which would compel Mr. Woodhouse to point out, I told you so. Rooms that are never properly aired are dangerous, he says in Emma, stale air being his prime concern for holding a ball at the long, stagnant rooms of the Crown Inn. Yet all is soon put to rights, and the health of Highbury restored by what else? The promise that its windows would soon be open and the ballroom thoroughly aired. Austenites love a good airing. Jane's term for joyriding in an open carriage, the Regency equivalent of driving in the car with the windows down. This reminds me of some of these phrases. A little air, a little sea bathing would do me good. A little airing. I need some fresh air. We've all stopped talking. We've all stopped saying these trivial things because we don't want to be boring, and we don't want to appear to be unintelligent. If all we can talk about is airing the house, you must not be very well educated. But there's something that we need to keep saying things like this to hand down to the next generation. There are important phrases used in Jane Austen's novels, and this man has drawn them out and shown why they were used. And seeing that we now spend more time in our modern carriages than ever before, it isn't off the health mark to say along with Mrs. Bennet, an airing would do me a great deal of good, because unless you're sitting in the glassy smog of bumper-to-bumper traffic, the air outside your vehicle is undeniably fresher than the air out inside. The ACs in our cars are notorious for circulating unwanted microbes and bacteria in confined spaces. 8 types of mold were found living in the air conditioning system of the cars tested by researchers at Louisiana State Medical Center. And as for that lovely new car smell, it's nothing less than toxic, a 200 plus chemical attack that can cause everything from headaches to hormonal imbalances. So roll down those windows because here comes Miss Bates. Miss Bates came to the carriage door, all gratitude and agreeing with her most earnestly in thinking an airing might be of the greatest service. Regency estates were completely without copses, woodland retreats where heroines idly roam and find near magical refreshment among the trees. A wooded grove brings much comfort to Anne's cluttered mind in persuasion, and Lizzie finds inexpressible enjoyment under the tree-lined path bordering the Rosings estate. Marianne waxes poetic when remembering her autumnal walks in Norland's woods. How I have delighted as I walked! What feelings have they, the season, and the air together inspired? Interestingly, the same sensations are now associated with one of the highest health trends in modern Japan, forest bathing. It is the belief that a leisurely stroll through the woods is deeply rejuvenating for the body and mind. Forest air is particularly rich in phytoncides, fragrant antimicrobial compounds swirling around the trees that when inhaled can reduce stress and boost our immune system. Spending time among trees specifically elevates the NK cells, white blood cells that fight tumors and infections, according to a seminal Japanese study. And most of us have a Regency-style copse of easy distance, whether it is a wooded park or a backwoods just beyond our backyard. Sometimes it's right there in your own backyard. There, like Fanny, we can substitute the bad air, bad smells of indoor life for liberty, freshness, fragrance, and verdure. Okay, so then the next time I read this, I'm going to read the sections called I Don't Mind Dirt. And there's so much in here that is so good and has inspired me so much. And even while I was reading it, I just thought, I need to go outside on purpose. Now, it does give your life more purpose when you read something like this and you start to see that there is great meaning in things like going outside, sitting on your porch and smelling something. Now, many of us around here have porches. Porches are very important to us because we can go and sit outside and kind of keep our eye on people and keep our eye on the neighbor's children or whatever. And I know there are places that don't have porches. And I was watching someone's video who was astonished that in America we had porches. And I know in other places there are a lot of porches too, but his country didn't have the porches. And I thought, what a great idea for some enterprising person to create portable porches that were on wheels and could be taken straight off of the back of their truck and wheeled up to someone's house, and they could rent a porch and have porches along their little apartment or any place where they didn't have porches. So everything is possible, You don't have to limit yourself to the way things are. So ladies, I hope this has done you a lot of good and that you're as inspired as I am by this book, The Jane Austen Diet, which is really just the Jane Austen lifestyle, and that you got a few things done while you listened. And I do have to come here more often, and I am following my own advice, going out more, exercising a little bit, and doing all the things mentioned in this reading that I have been doing. So ladies, God bless you for coming, and for those of you who are contributing, there is a PayPal section on the page on which I am posting this. So you can go over there and read it there and help me out a little bit if you want to. And I'd like to thank you all for your kindness and for coming here and for giving me encouragement. So I'll see you later. Bye.